Hey guys, how's it going? So today I wanted to respond to a comment on my previous video talking about soul trap theology. Now, it is a bit of a longer comment, so what I'm going to do today is a bit different than my normal format. I'm going to actually pull up the comment here, and I kind of want to go through it line by line, kind of addressing some of the points that this person made and maybe clarifying both what I meant in the first video and maybe some points on this that I can answer their questions for. So I'll hop over here. This is from Adam Farrow 8188. Thank you, Adam. I'm glad that you responded to this one too. Can't believe I missed this video. Glad I caught it, but it leaves me with some major questions. Glad you caught it too. You're assuming Catholic metaphysics is absolute reality to prove reincarnation is impossible, which is circular logic. Okay, couple comments on this one. It's not circular logic. What I think you're probably looking for is begging the question. Circular logic would mean I assume Catholic metaphysics is absolute reality and use that to prove reincarnation is impossible, but then using the impossibility of reincarnation to prove the absolute reality of Catholic metaphysics. So it's not actually circular reasoning, because circular reasoning would rely on the conclusion feeding back up to prove the premises. That's not what I'm doing. I think what you might mean is begging the question. Begging the question is where one of your propositions or premises for your argument is assumed, or you say, just trust me, bro, right? So I think what you're getting at here is that I am claiming Catholic metaphysics is actually how reality works, and I'm just assuming that as a premise, which would be begging the question. And for the most part, you're right, except what I want to clarify is that my goal in my previous video, and for the most part in this video, is not to necessarily say that this is what you have to believe and this is what science and all reason says must be true. That's not what my goal is. My goal in this is to address your questions and the problem you're presenting in the prison planet theory from a Catholic perspective. So I'm trying to address it from what the Catholic Church says, and so I'm taking the Catholic Church's metaphysics as the basis for my reasoning. Now, that said, there is a bit more to it than just Catholic metaphysics. What I'm actually basing this off of isn't a lot of Catholic metaphysics. It is used in Catholic metaphysics, but it actually comes more out of philosophy and the histories of philosophy, especially ancient and medieval philosophy. Now, these are used a lot by Catholic metaphysics, but I'm actually basing it more off of this history and reason-based philosophy over just Catholic theology. One really big part of this is back in Aristotle. And you actually mention this later on right here, hylomorphism. So I'll just read a bit more of what you say. Coming from free grace framework where salvation is a simple, completed gift of justification and assurance through Christ's finished work received solely by faith. Building these complex, rigid philosophical rules, like hylomorphism, feels like human tradition rather than divine law. So, technically, yes. Any kind of rational exploration, this includes science, is, in a sense, human tradition. However, what we're doing is practicing the rational analysis of observed reality. Aristotle recognized that there were facts of reality that could not be simply described as physical. A very common example used for this is actually the concept of numbers. Number is a real thing. It affects the physical world around us and is actual thing, right? I can say that this is one remote for my lights. I could say that this is one remote for the fan behind me, right? I could say that these are two remotes total. So that concept of number or quantity has an effect on reality, can be observed within reality, but the quantity itself, the idea of number itself, is not physical. So what I mean by this is, let me grab a prop from right back here. Here I have two writing utensils, and here I have the two remotes. Now, in both cases, there are two. But it can't be described as here is one two and here is a different two. The fact of two-ness, the idea of that much quantity of two, is persistent across both of these. It's the same thing. It's constant. I can't identify two and then something else that is also all the exact same qualities of two, but it's not the same two. I can say that here's one instance of two in the remotes and another instance of two in the writing utensils, but the two-ness of them remains the same. It is the same two-ness. We can't distinguish it because there's nothing to distinguish it by. This is something that is developed a little bit further on beyond Aristotle. It's still considering hylomorphism. I'll get into what that is in just a second here. But the fact is that a spiritual, or to use the philosophical term, a noumenal concept cannot be distinguished in number, only in kind. What that means is there is, like the concept of two, there's one concept of two that can be observed across many different physical things, but then there's a concept of three. The concept of three is not the concept of two. It's similar, it's related, but it's distinct. So this noumenal concept, or this non-physical concept, this is what theologians call spiritual concepts, differentiate in their qualities, in their kinds, but not in how many they are. They can't be distinguished in how many they are. Because if I had two here and two over here, and they're identical in every way, they are conceptually the exact same. They can't be distinguished from one another, the way physical objects can. Physical objects are differentiated in number, but may be the same in kind. That is, I can have one remote here. I could also get an identical remote to this, but it would still be distinguishable. I can say, here's this remote and here's that remote. They're identical in every way in what they are, except that they are one here and one here. Right? These things become differentiated by space or by material, like what it's actually made out of. For example, I could talk about a chair, like this desk chair that I have. And I can also talk about like a couch, or like the couch behind me, or a couch chair. And they're both sharing in the same chairness. They are both chairs, but their exact qualities, their physical qualities, are distinguished. There's two different chairs. There's maybe a brown chair and a black chair. They're different, even though they maintain that same concept, chairness. So this can all be technically called human tradition, in the sense that human tradition is our method of compiling these rational observations about reality and passing them on to one another. It's not necessarily the same as what we often think of tradition of being like, we carve pumpkins on Halloween. This is a cultural practice that has been passed on by way of tradition that is from one generation to the next, but is distinct from the kind of tradition I'm talking about here, which is the human ability to compile and analyze data. Interestingly enough, science, and you talk a little bit about philosophy, science, empirical data, scripture, all that. These all fit into the same category of or of tradition, I mean. So it's just, this is the method that we have. Even science is one method that we use. Science is technically just a method, which we actually filter through philosophy to understand. Science is a method of discerning more data. In logic, we use what are called the 3 acts of the mind. So these are to observe reality, simple apprehension, right? I can see a thing, or feel a thing, or hear a thing, whatever it is, simple apprehension. Then I can extract data from that, simple observations about that data, and then I can rationalize with that data. Science is just an expansion of this, where we can create new sources of data through experimentation and analysis. Philosophy then takes all that data and interprets it. That's what we're doing, and I suppose that could all be called a kind of human tradition. But you're comparing human tradition with divine law. That is, I think you mean reality as God created it and decided it would be. When God laid out the foundations of the earth, he decided it's going to be this big, right? The rules of physics are going to operate in these ways. And I think that's what you're considering divine law, like the actual structure and way that God decided reality would work. And yeah, we can distinguish those, but the act of human tradition, as I've defined it, is actually the analysis of that divine law. So by observing reality and using our mind and our ability to be rational to consider and analyze it, we are discovering what the actual divine law is through human tradition. Now, you say here, even looking through this through philosophy, science, empirical data, scripture, the Catholic dismissal doesn't hold up. That is, what I'm saying is, we cannot consider the prison planet theory, this is what I said in my previous video, as whole hog, because we cannot be reincarnated. So, getting back to this hylomorphism, this is what I've talked about a lot before in how we have matter and form. I was talking before about how two is an abstract concept, or noumenal concept. It's not physical, but it is real. Matter is those physical things, or the actualization. So in this, having one remote, one is the spiritual concept, the non-physical concept, but it's been actualized in the presence of this remote. That would mean that the remote here is the matter that the number one is acting upon. Humans have a soul, that is the concept of our being, and a body. That would be the matter. So we have to remember that the soul, our form, is not some weird energy beyond, right? It's more like how numbers work. It is the concept of our being, the rational structure and capacity of our being. Our matter, our actual bodies, is the actualization of that form. Just like how this remote stands as the actualization of the number one, our bodies are the actualization of our souls. Much like how the number 1 cannot be distinguished from this one remote and from this one remote, it's still the same number. Our soul cannot be distinguished, at least insofar as it is human, from another human soul. It's distinguished in the shape of our bodies. If we were to take the soul, the form of this person, and put it in a different body, it would have to be distinguished from this person as a different person. Because the body is the method by which we distinguish the soul. Many Catholic theologians will only distinguish one soul from another, or claim that one soul can only be distinguished from another, insofar as you can say that soul was the one imbued to this body. The souls can only be distinguished, rationally speaking, because they're not physical, they don't have quantity to them, in their actualization, that is the body. What you say down here, find it, conservation of energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. This is true of physical energy, yes. If the soul is spiritual energy, which is not a term that we've previously described. I'll get into that a little bit more here in a second. Recycling it into a new physical vessel makes far more logical sense than being locked into one decaying body. Discounting this completely ignores thousands of documented past life cases. Okay. The idea of spiritual energy is wishy-washy, I would say, at best. We don't know entirely how spiritual things work, but equating them to physical energy, I don't think is effective. In order for it, what you're describing here, right, if the soul is spiritual energy and recycling it into a new physical vessel, what you're talking about, I would suppose, is if you took the concept of a person and applied that concept or that form to another person. But this doesn't work. Because like I said, that concept is only differentiated by the body. Now, this does get into some really confusing and somewhat debated metaphysics today. There's a concept known as an essential accident. So, accidents are qualities that can be applied to a thing that don't change what the thing is. For example, my hair is brown. If my hair were blonde or red, it would not be not hair. It's still hair. It's still what it is. That's an accident. An accident can change what a thing is. Technically, right now, I'm standing. That's an accident, because I can be described as standing upright. If I were to sit down, I could be described as sitting down, but I'm still me. I haven't changed. Those are what accidents are. Essential accidents is this idea of something that distinguishes one thing from another in a way that if you change it, doesn't change the essence of the thing, it doesn't change what it is, but it would change something fundamental about the thing. For example, men and women are both humans, but we are humans of different kinds. One is male and one is female, right? The role we take in reproduction is different, things like that. If you change that accidental quality, because it is an accident insofar as it doesn't change our humanity, but if you were to change that about a person, you'd be changing something fundamental about who the person is or what the person is. So that's what's considered an essential accident. These are qualities to the matter, that is our bodies, it sounded weird, that changes something essential about what the thing is without changing the whole of the thing. If I were to take my soul, or the concept of me, and apply that to a different body, then the essential accidents, which identify this body as me in particular, now identify it as a different person in particular, because I have changed essential accidents. So if I were to take this spiritual energy, or even the same form, and put it into a different person, I'd still have to describe it as a different person. Even though I can't really distinguish this form, because this form is only distinguished, like this human being that is me, is only distinguished as me because it's part of my body. Just like, again, this number, this quantity of one remote is different from this one in that it's a different remote, not a different one. So if you have a different human, you have the same humanity, but a different person. Memory wipe. Reincarnation doesn't claim... Discounting this completely ignores thousands of documented past life cases. I was looking into this one a bit. I've got some studies here I pulled up. This is one study that has actually got one, maybe two of the names that you mentioned here. Ivan Stevenson. I haven't seen anything from Ian Stevenson, actually, but I have looked into a bit of Dr. Tucker's work, and including these articles from him in from the University of Virginia. I don't find in these studies that have been done any claim that this is reincarnation. What we've seen is some interesting cases where young children have managed to produce veridical knowledge. That is, true knowledge about something they'd have no way of producing knowledge of. And that's really interesting, and I'm going to make no claim that the spiritual world is something we totally understand, and how that all works is something we understand. From a Catholic perspective, the explanation being reincarnation does not make sense. Especially because matter, and like our study in science, would say that the brain is where the memories are. And so the ability of a child to somehow retain memories across death and life into a new body, I don't know how that would work. Not only do I not understand how a person could be put into a new body, because that would just be a different person, like I've said before, but we don't have any physical explanation in how the memory would be there. And the science is saying that memories should be in the brain. So if a child has a new memory like this, or memory of something they shouldn't be able to know, that's really mysterious. And that's something we don't understand yet. I don't know that reincarnation is a necessary conclusion, though. You're right. Like this article here from the University of Virginia does talk about how they have, somewhere on here, thousands of, over 2,500 cases of reincarnation type, of the reincarnation type is what it says here. They're called of the reincarnation type, from what I can tell, because it's young children claiming to be a different person, or somebody who died. Oftentimes, these are memories of gruesome deaths. And how a child would know about these things is something we don't know, but there's other possible explanations, including explanations that do fit into the Catholic metaphysic. For example, this could be, at the most surface level, and from what I was reading, it could be that these are things that the children took in through some source that they don't know, right? Whether it's things they've seen without realizing that they've seen or heard. But there's no proof that that's what it is. Some of them are kind of hogwashy, right? We're not sure. It could be that children are creating memories, because we know that children are particularly good at creating false memories. Now, that doesn't cover the fact of them being true. From a Catholic perspective, it could be some person communicating with some other person communicating with that child. From a Catholic perspective, there are reasons that might happen, and there are reasons that might be the child thinking it was past memories. For example, the vast majority of these studies, from what I have found, have been done in cultures that have a heavy emphasis on reincarnation. So if some deceased person were to come along and say, here's a bit of my life that I want you to know about, it could be that child interpreted that as their own memories from a past life. Now, that doesn't explain everything. Again, not all of the studies were done. Some of these studies have found cases in non-reincarnation believing cultures. So it doesn't totally lay out. The Catholic perspective, I think, here would say spirits, we know that the spirits of the deceased, in some cases, can communicate with the living, typically for the purpose of asking for prayers. We also find that children are often more aware of the spiritual reality than adults are. So it might be that these children are more aware of these spirits asking for prayers than we are. Right? I don't know. This is just my thoughts from what the Catholic perspective on this might be. If the soul is the form of a human, any human body fits that basic structural requirement. This is correct, because all humans share the same form. Why couldn't that same core energy inform a new body that meets similar structural/genetic parameters? Because the way we distinguish that same form of humanity that all humans share is by the body. So if you were to take the form of a human and apply it to a new body, then, well, congratulations, that's just a new human. It doesn't make sense. Furthermore, you'd have to detach all of those, what I called before the essential accidents, from the human form to apply it to a new person, because otherwise the soul would bring those accidents along and make it into the same person it was before. Right? You'd have to detach the distinguishing features from the human form to apply it to a new person, which is just how we define a new person. The memory wipe. Reincarnation theorists don't claim that your brain keeps its memories. The ego dies with the body, but the underlying spirit carries on. Not remembering a past life doesn't mean it didn't happen. You're true. You're correct. Not remembering a past life does not mean it didn't happen. But that's also not evidence that it did happen. Reincarnation theorists don't claim your brain keeps its memories. No, I don't know what your point is, honestly, with this. I don't think that keeping your memories is a necessary part of denying reincarnation. In order to, if you keep your memories, you don't necessarily be the same person, right? If you did keep your memories, like, and you're not, this just wasn't part of what my argument was. So I'm not sure what you're looking for in terms of that. Spiritual warfare and divine grace. While some use Hebrews to dismiss reincarnation, this overlooks the reality of a fallen world ruled by principalities. where Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. If God permits a recycling mechanism with this fallen framework, it directly aligns with his nature in 1 Timothy, who will have all men be saved. And 2 Peter, the Lord is long-suffering, not willing any should perish. God allows the time necessary for souls to realize human effort is futile until they trust in the one who broke the system. I believe this is coming... You're talking about the free grace theology. And this is just one that the Catholic Church doesn't believe in. And it is very similar, though not identical, to the idea of being saved by faith alone. That is, all you have to do is make an act of faith or consent in your mind to the salvation given to us by God. This is something that is very nuanced in the way that the Catholic Church disagrees with. We do believe that the initial offer of grace is something that has to come from God and not from ourselves, and we just have to accept it. That is that is Catholic theology, that God offers us salvation and we have to accept that salvation. One of the big distinctions in Catholic theology is that you can lose your salvation. We can come along and say, actually, I'm not going to be saved. This is because the way that humans understand heaven and Catholics understand salvation and heaven, what heaven is a uniting with God, that we become in a very close and almost perfect interlocking relationship with the divine being. Hell is just the opposite of that. But while we use this language of justice and punishment and reward, one of the major ways that we think of this as Catholics is actually to say, you choose it. You're choosing whether you're going to be in relationship with God or not. So God has to make the initial offer because we can't force God to be in a relationship with us. And God does not rescind that offer. But we can accept it at one point and then decide later, actually, I don't want this relationship with you, and walk away from it. Free grace seems to be looking for a solution to the Calvinist position, I think, or generally the saved by faith alone position, which has some problems such as if you have genuinely made an act of faith in accepting the salvation given to us by Christ, you cannot walk back from that. Especially in Calvinism. Calvin says you cannot then deny the grace you've already accepted. So if you walk away from it, if you do actively leave your faith, and you're saved by faith alone, so your faith, then you never actually made that connection. I think free grace theology is trying to get around that issue by saying because you've understood the salvation, because you've consented to it and taken the steps towards salvation, it doesn't matter if you backpedal because you have consented to it. I think that's what free grace is trying to get at. And so I think it's trying to solve a problem that the Catholic Church isn't addressing because it's not a problem for us. And it's just not the same mechanism that we understand salvation to work by. Do you have to accept reincarnation as true? Definitely not. I agree. I think you've made some interesting points and interesting arguments throughout this. But yeah, you're right. In the end of the day, you choose what you're believing. I don't personally think, like some of these points that you made up here, like the thousands of documented past life cases, I just personally don't think that is necessary. I don't think it's the only conclusion. So I'm not going to fall to it, especially as a Catholic who does hold to what the Catholic Church teaches. I'm not going to follow down that path since the Catholic Church doesn't believe in reincarnation. So, I just want to say that many people have had near-death experiences that align with Catholicism but never free grace. That's true. I actually listened to a really interesting podcast just the other day on shared death experiences and near-death experiences, where there's a lot of, just like there's documented cases of like remembering or having memories of past lives, there's a lot of documented cases of near-death experiences or shared death experiences with seeing like people walked off into some kind of afterlife or bright light. It's really fascinating, definitely worth looking into. What else? Also, the lack of Paul in these near-death experiences is a whole other topic worth mentioning. If you'd like to respond to this again, I'm not sure what you mean by that. If you're talking about maybe in Acts, when Paul is smitten off his horse and has a conversation with Jesus, if that's what you're talking about, his big conversion moment, I'm not sure. If you could say more on that, perhaps. So, I had a lot of thoughts in this. This is a much longer video than my typical video, so thank you guys for sticking through it. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, I know I just dumped a whole lot on you. Please leave them in the comments box below. I try to respond to every single comment, and so I might even respond to it in the same way I've responded to this one. If you like the video, please do give it a like. And if you want to see more of my content or content like this, hit the subscribe button. I'll show up in your feed every time I upload my videos. So thank you guys so much for watching. God bless.